All right, so we are talking about quadratic equations, a different way of solving quadratic equations, which is using completing the squares. So the standard form for quadratic equations ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to, before I teach you the completing the square, I want to do a couple of things here. One is it's kind of working backwards here. So let's say, for example, if I take x minus 1 squared. Well, that's going to give me x minus 1 times x minus 1. Yes, that means I have to FOIL this or double distribute this, which is going to get me the x squared minus 2x plus 1. So there is a relationship between the b and the c when everything works out so perfectly that it would have the same two factors. Okay, so there is a relationship between that. And on top of that, the a is also equal to 1. So let's keep on going. Let's say I use x plus 2 squared. Well, that's x plus 2 times x plus 2. That's going to give me x squared plus 4x plus 4. Same thing here. X is equal to 1. A is equal to 1. There's a relationship between the b and the c. So the question is, what is that relationship? And it doesn't matter what you do. If a comes out to be 1, the b and the c has a relationship. And the relationship is this, is that c is equal to b divided by 2 squared. So that's something that you need to remember. And it always works out that way. So if you take any binomial, square it, and where the a comes out to equal 1, you'll have this relationship where if you take the b divided by 2 and square it, it will be your c. Okay? Always works. So the next thing I want to talk about is this. Okay, so let's take a binomial that doesn't make the a to be 1. For example, 2x plus, let's go 2x minus 3 squared. Well, if I do this, this is 2x minus 3 times 2x minus 3. Well, what does that give me? That's going to give me 4x squared. If I follow this, 4x squared minus 12x plus 9. And if you notice that the b and the c does not have this relationship, because if you take the b divided by 2 and square it, it's going to give you 36. So it doesn't work that way. However, if I was to make this a 1, then it would work. Okay, so if this was an equation, then I could divide everything by 4. Then I would have x squared minus 3x plus 9/4 equals 0. So ask yourself, if I took, is c equal to, question mark, of course, yeah, that's close enough. Is that equal to the b divided by 2 squared? So is c equal to negative 3 divided by 2 squared? Well, what is, actually I should say this, is 9/4 equal to negative 3 divided by 2 squared? And the answer is yes, it is. So in other words, if I have one that if the a isn't equal to 1, I can make a equal to 1 and it'll still have this same relationship. The other part that I want to bring up is that if we have a x squared equal 9, there's two ways of solving this. One way is that I would take the square root of both sides. However, anytime I take the square root of both sides, I have to put down plus and minus, which is a positive and a negative. All right. And on the left side here, the square root and the squared are opposite operations. So they actually cancel each other out. So what I would have is x on the left side and on the right side plus and minus 3. This gives me two answers. X equals 3 and x equals negative 3. Okay. Now, the second way of doing it, so I'll put down this as one way. The second way of doing it is that when you see a squared and an equal sign, when you see a square and equal sign, you think of quadratic, so you automatically bring the 9 over, bring everything to one side, so you have a non-zero side and a zero side. And you have to factor the non-zero side, and that's going to be a binomial, no GCF. So you ask yourself, is it the difference of two squares? And the answer is yes, it is. So you got x minus 3, x plus 3, and set that equal to 0. So you set each factor equal to 0 because of the 0 property. So x plus 3 equals 0. So x equals 3, x equals negative 3. So that proves that this is the truth, that I do need that plus and minus in order for it to work. Okay, let me do this instead. Okay. Now I am going to stick with the method 1 here. So my whole goal here is to get some kind of factor squared. So something that's so perfect that I get the same factors equal to something on the right side. So that's my goal. All right. So let's do some examples on these completing the square to solve for quadratic equations. So let's use example 1. Let's say I got 2x squared minus 36x plus 34 equals 0. Okay, so my step 1 is going to be to get my a to equal 1. Well, to do that, since a is equal to 2, I'm going to divide by 2, because 2 divided by 2 would give me 1. So I got x squared minus 18x plus 17 is equal to 0. So my a is equal to 1. What's step 2? Step 2 is to move my old c to the other side. Well, to move it, I got to subtract the 17, so I get x squared minus 18x is equal to negative 17. So that's the only way I can move it, is to subtract the 17 from both sides. Step 3. Step 3 is going to be find a new c, which is equal to b divided by 2 squared. Well, my b is negative 18, so I got negative 18 divided by 2 squared. Now, this part right here is important because I want to show this part of the work because it's going to help me. So this is going to give me a negative 9, okay? Negative 9 squared, which is equal to 81. Now, I want to find a new c, comma, and add it to both add it to both sides. Okay, so I'm taking the 81, I'm adding the 81, and notice that it was green here and it's green here. And the reason why I added both sides is because, again, it's an equation, so the left side and the right side are equal. So what I want to do, if I add 81 pounds on the left side, I got to add 81 pounds on the right side to keep it balanced, okay? So, question is, what is step 4? Well, step 4 is to factor the left side and to add or subtract the right side. There we go. All right. So, factoring the left side is actually pretty easy. The work is already done for you, okay? It's already done for you. So, the left side, factoring that, is going to be x minus 9 squared is equal to 64. So yes, notice the blue on the right side, notice the blue on the left side where the equation is, okay? Or should I say, notice the blue in the directions versus the blue in the equation, all right? So that's what I have. So I have x minus 9 squared is equal to 64. So the last step, step 5, is to solve. So to solve this, I need to get rid of that square root, and solving means I gotta get x by itself. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus and minus. So when I take the square root of both sides, the square root and the square root are opposite. So I have x minus 9 left equals plus or minus 8. So I gotta get x by itself still. So I gotta add 9 over. So I got x equals 9 plus or minus 8. So I have two answers here. X is equal to 9 plus 8, and x is equal to 9 minus 8. So x is equal to 17, and x is equal to 1. So there is my answer. There we go. Bring this down a little bit. There we go. All right. All right. So let's continue on and get to the second example. Second example, example 2. So let's call this a 3x squared plus 36x minus 102 is equal to 0. So again, step 1, get a equal to 1. So divide everything by 3. So x squared plus 12x minus 34 is equal to 0. Step 2, move old c. So I have x squared plus 12x is equal to 34. Step 3, find new c, which is b divided by 2 squared, and add struggle bus and add it to both sides. All right, so what's my b? So my b is 12 divided by 2 squared. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. Which is equal to 36. All right. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. Okay. So from there, step 4. factor the left side of the equal sign and add or subtract the right side of the equal sign. So the left side is going to be x plus six squared is equal to 70. And step 5 is to solve. Okay, so I have x plus 6 squared is equal to 70. I want to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus and minus. So I have x plus 6 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 70. And even if I was to break down 70, 70 is 2 times 5 times 7, which has no pairs. So therefore, I can't simplify square root of 70 at all. So that means I continue on. I got x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 70. All right, so that's my answer. I can still go into two different answers if we want, which is negative 6 plus square root of 70, or x is equal to negative 6 minus square root of 70. Okay, so all depends on what they're asking for. If they're only asking for one answer, then you got it. If they're asking for two answers, now you got the two answers. All right. Example 3. Let's go with the 5x squared minus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. All right. Step 1. Get a equal 1. Okay, so I get divide by 5, divide by 5, divide by 5, divide by 5. So I have x squared. I get x squared minus 3/5 x plus 2/5 equals 0. All right, step 2. Move the old c. Okay, so let's move it. So I have x squared minus 3/5 x is equal to negative 2/5. And the reason is because I got to subtract that 2/5, right? 3. Find new c, which is equal to b divided by 2 squared. So my b is negative 3/5 divided by 2 squared, which is equal to something squared, which is equal to something. So what is negative 3/5 divided by 2? So negative 3/5 divided by 2 is equal to negative 3/5 times, copy, change, flip, which is equal to negative 3 over 10. So this is negative 3 over 10. And that squared is going to give you 9 over 100. So I'm going to add this side, 9 over 100, and this side, 9 over 100. All right. Step 4, factor the left side of the equal sign, and on the right side of the equal sign, add or subtract. So the left side is going to be x minus 3 over 10 squared is equal to, I need common denominators. You can certainly do this in your calculator if you want, but to get common denominator, I gotta multiply the 5 by 20, because 5 times 20 equals 100. So if I do it to the bottom, I gotta do it to the top. So the top is a negative 40 plus 9, so it's gonna be a negative 31 over 100. So right, and step 5 is to solve. Okay, So step 5 is to solve. So I need to go x minus 3 over 10 squared is equal to negative 31 over 100. So I got to take the square root of both sides, but I can't forget the plus and minus. All right, so on the left side I have x minus 3 over 10, and that's equal to plus or minus I square root of 31 over 10. So now I got to add the 3/10 over, so I get x is equal to 3 over 10 plus or minus I square root of 31 over 10. So there's two ways of looking at this. One is before we were introduced about a plus bi form, where we would put these together because it's two fractions I'm adding or subtracting. So I would actually have x equals, when I'm adding fraction or subtracting fraction, I keep the bottom and add or subtract the top. However, these are not like terms, so I have to keep it that way. All right. And yes, if there are different denominators, you're going to have to find common denominators so that you can put it as one fraction. However, now that we have been introduced to a plus bi form, okay, that means I have a bigger expectation where I can write this in a plus bi form, which would be 3 over 10 plus or minus square root of 31 over 10 I. So this would be my a plus bi form. All right. All right, let's do one more. Example 4. So I got 2x squared minus 3x minus 5 equals 0. So let's go through it. Step 1. So this is step 1, was to get a to equal to 1. So therefore I have x squared minus 3 halves x minus 5 halves equals 0. Step 2. I have to move the old c to the other side. So I have x squared minus 3 halves x. Add the 5 halves. Step 3, I got to find a new c. So I have b divided by 2 squared, which is equal to negative 3 halves divided by 2 squared, which this is equal to negative, let's try that again. It's going to be negative 3/4 squared, which is equal to 9 over 16. Okay, so therefore my step 3 here is going to look something like this. X squared minus 3 halves x plus 9 over 16 is equal to 5 halves plus 9 over 16. All right. Step 4 is this right here. Step 4 is where I'm going to factor this side, which is going to be x minus 3/4 squared, which is equal to, well, in order for me to add these two, I need common denominators. 2 times 8 gives you 16, so I'll do it to the bottom, I got to do it to the top. The top is 8 times 5, which is 40, plus 9 is 49. So I got 49 over 16. Step 5 is to solve. So I have here x minus 3/4 squared is equal to 49 over 16. So to solve this, I got to take the square root of this side plus or minus the square root of this side. So I got x minus 3/4 is equal to plus and minus 7 over 4, because square root of 49 is 7, square root of 16 is 4. So I gotta keep on going. So this is still all step 5. So I gotta bring the minus 3/4 over to the right side. So I have x is equal to 3/4 plus or minus 7/4. I have two answers here. One is that x is equal to 3/4 plus 7/4, which gives you 10/4. So it gives me x equals 5/2. And then my other answer is x is equal to 3/4 minus 7/4, which gives me negative 4/4, which tells me that x is equal to negative 1. So there goes my two answers. And I hope that this helps with quadratic equation and we're using completing the squares. Well, have fun. If you have any questions, you know how to get hold of me.